While my husband was away for work, I received a message from his mother saying, "Your marriage is over and I've taken the kids to our family home." I responded with, "You won't be able to keep them." When he came back, he found a house empty and a new life waiting for me. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. A simple vibration against the wooden nightstand. At first, I barely registered it. The scent of freshly washed linen filled the room as I neatly arranged the last pile of clothes. It was a routine task, one that carried a quiet satisfaction. But when I picked up my phone, everything changed. A message from my mother-in-law. The preview on the screen sent a chill down my spine. I hesitated, my pulse quickening as my thumb hovered over the notification. Something felt wrong. I took a deep breath and tapped the message open. "Your marriage is over. I've taken the kids to our family home." Betrayal cuts deep, but revenge carves the path to freedom. This isn't just a story, it's a reckoning. A fight for justice, a mother's war, and a lesson for those who think they can control the ones they underestimate. If you believe in strength, in rising from the ashes, in taking back what's yours, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes, the best revenge is watching them lose everything they tried to steal. Let's begin. For a moment, my mind refused to process the words. They stood there, stark and unyielding, a sentence that reshaped my entire existence in a single instant. My knees nearly buckled beneath me and I reached for the dresser to steady myself. Oh, this had to be a misunderstanding. I read the message again and again, but the words didn't change. The laundry in my hands slipped to the floor as a deep hollow ache spread through my chest. My children, my babies, had been taken from me. I tried to call my husband. Straight to voicemail. And again. No answer. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat, my hands trembling as I switched to calling my mother-in-law. He had to explain. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was eerily calm, almost triumphant. "It's for the best," she said before I could even speak. "They belong with their family, not in that house with you." Her words were a blade cutting deep into my heart. Not in that house with me. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Where are they?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Safe," she said, her tone filled with smug satisfaction. "You'll understand soon enough." Understand? I already understood. She had planned this. She had waited for the moment my husband was away to strike. She had always wanted control, always undermining me, always looking for ways to push me aside. And now she had taken my children. A burning sensation filled my chest, but it wasn't grief anymore. It was something sharper. Something stronger. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "You won't be able to keep them," I said, my voice cold. For the first time there was silence on the other end. She hadn't expected that. I ended the call. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry to her. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I took a step back and looked at the house around me. The home I had built. The place I had loved and filled with memories. And now it was empty. But not for long. I sat down, my mind racing with possibilities. She thought she had won. She thought she had backed me into a corner, that I would break down and accept this fate. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I pulled my laptop toward me and started looking up custody laws. Every law. Every loophole. Every weapon I could use against her. She had played her hand. Now it was my turn. I wouldn't just take my children back. I would make sure she never had the power to take anything from me again. I sat there in the dim glow of my laptop screen, scrolling through legal documents, custody laws, and anything that could give me an edge. The silence in the house was deafening, an eerie contrast to the usual chaos of my children running around. I had spent years building a life inside these walls, but tonight, it felt hollow, like a shell of the home it once was. The realization settled in my bones. I had never truly belonged here. Not in this marriage. Not in this family. Looking back, the signs had always been there. My mother-in-law had never accepted me. From the moment my husband introduced me to his family, she had sized me up with that calculated look, her lips curving into a smile that never reached her eyes. She had been polite, too polite. The kind of politeness that was meant to keep someone at arm's length while pretending to be warm. At first, I thought I could win her over. I made every effort. I attended every family gathering, cooked meals the way she liked them, dressed the way she subtly hinted would be more appropriate. And for a while I convinced myself I was making progress. But then came the small exclusions. The whispers behind closed doors, the decisions made without me. The first time I realized my husband was siding with her over me, it had been about something trivial. Our wedding venue. She had insisted on one location. I had chosen another. I should have seen it for what it was then. He told me, it's just a venue. It's important to her. So I let it go. Then came the next thing. The way she accidentally called me by his ex-girlfriend's name in front of extended family. The way she inserted herself into every parenting decision once our children were born. The way she made it clear in small but deliberate ways that I was merely a guest in her son's life. And my husband, he had let it happen. I wasn't stupid. I had felt the shift over the years. The way his calls grew shorter when he traveled for work. The way his texts became less affectionate. The way he always seemed to be defending his mother instead of me. He never outright betrayed me, but betrayal isn't always about one big act. Sometimes, it's the slow erosion of trust, the gradual decay of a foundation that was never as strong as you believed. And now I was staring at the result of that decay. My marriage wasn't just over because my mother-in-law had taken my children. It had been over for a long time. I had just refused to see it. A notification flashed on my screen. An email from my husband. I clicked on it, my heart pounding. We need to talk. I know you're upset, but this is what's best for everyone. The kids will be happier with my mother for now. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. I stared at the words, my fingers gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles ached. He was treating this like a business arrangement, like some logistical inconvenience rather than the complete destruction of our family. Happier? With her? He had no idea what he had done. I closed my laptop, standing up so quickly that the chair scraped against the floor. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, and for the first time in years I saw myself clearly. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't devastation. This was clarity. For years, I had believed that if I loved hard enough, if I fought long enough, I could hold on to this marriage. That I could prove to his family that I belonged, that I was worthy. I wasn't going to make that mistake anymore. I reached for my phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hey, it's me," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. There was a pause on the other end. "I was wondering when you'd call." I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. My best friend. The one person who had seen the warning signs long before I had been willing to admit them. The one who had told me on more than one occasion, "You're losing yourself in this marriage." I had pushed her away, believing she didn't understand. But now I knew she had seen the truth more clearly than I ever had. "I need your help," I said. He didn't hesitate. "Tell me what you need." And just like that, I took my first step toward reclaiming my life. I wasn't going to cry over what was lost. I was going to take back what was mine. The silence between us stretched, heavy with unspoken words. My best friend had always been my anchor, the one who saw through the cracks in my life even when I refused to. And now, as I sat there gripping my phone, I felt the weight of every mistake I had made. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice firm but calm. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. "They took my kids," I said. The words sounded foreign, as if they belonged to someone else. "His mother. While he was away. And he let it happen." A sharp intake of breath came from the other end. I knew she was manipulative, but this is next level. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "He sent me an email. Said it was for the best and that the kids would be happier with her." There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. One that held no humor. "Happier? With the same woman who tried to control every part of your life? The same woman who questioned every decision you made as a mother?" I pressed my fingers against my temples. "Exactly." "Okay," she said, her voice shifting into something steadier. "Listen to me. We're not going to react emotionally. We're going to be strategic. They think they've backed you into a corner, but what they don't realize is, you're not the same woman who let them walk all over her." I closed my eyes. The words sank in, settling into the space where my grief had been. "I need to know how far this goes," I said, my voice tightening with resolve. "Because if he was willing to do this, then there's more I don't know." "Then we find out," she said. "And we do it quietly." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I couldn't afford to react impulsively. If I wanted to win this, I needed to know exactly what I was up against. After ending the call, I sat in the dimly lit room, staring at the blank walls. Everything felt different now. My home, my marriage, even my past. It all seemed like a carefully constructed illusion, one that had crumbled the moment that message appeared on my screen. I opened my laptop again, but this time I wasn't looking at custody laws. I was looking at our finances. If he was willing to take my children away, what else had he been hiding? The number stared back at me, but something felt off. Our accounts should have been in better shape. We had a budget, investments, things I had carefully managed over the years. But the balance was lower than I expected. I clicked through statements, searching for anything unusual. And then I saw it. A transfer. Multiple, actually. Small amounts at first, nothing that would raise suspicion. But over time they added up. And they all led to an account I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. Where was the money going? I grabbed my phone again and dialed the one person who could make sense of this. Our financial advisor. The man who had always handled our investments, the one my husband and I had both trusted. He answered on the second ring. Hey, long time no talk. Everything all right? I forced a calm tone. I just had a quick question about our accounts. I was going through the statements and noticed some transactions I don't recognize. Can you help me understand them? Of course, he said. Which ones are you looking at? I gave him the dates and amounts. There was a slight pause before he spoke again. Oh, those. Yeah, those were transfers your husband requested a few months ago. He said he was restructuring some of your assets for. My breath caught. Wait. A few months ago? Yeah, he confirmed. He mentioned it was to cover some unexpected expenses and investments. He was pretty clear about it. I gripped the phone tighter. Months ago. Long before I had any idea my marriage was crumbling. Long before I knew he had been preparing for this. I managed to thank him before ending the call. My mind was spinning, piecing together the puzzle I had ignored for too long. This wasn't just about my children. He had been planning something. Moving money. Cutting me out. And I had been blind to it. I clenched my jaw, the betrayal settling into something deeper. Something stronger. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I wouldn't fight back. I opened my email, staring at his message once more. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. A slow, cold smile formed on my lips. He had no idea what difficult looked like. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My mind was racing, connecting every missing piece. The financial transfers, the secrecy, the way my husband had systematically moved money out of our accounts. It wasn't just a careless oversight. It was intentional. He had been setting the stage for months, making sure that when he finally pulled the rug out from under me, I wouldn't have the resources to fight back. But he had underestimated me. I wasn't going to sit back and let them dictate my fate. I had lost my children, my home felt like a stranger's house, and the man I had trusted had betrayed me in a way I never saw coming. But I still had one thing left. My will to fight. My fingers hovered over my keyboard before I opened a new email. I needed legal counsel and I needed it fast. Every second that passed was another moment they had the upper hand. I had no intention of giving them any more power over my life. I typed a brief but urgent message to a highly recommended attorney I had found after hours of research. The email was to the point. I need immediate legal assistance regarding an unauthorized custody change and financial discrepancies in my marriage. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. As I waited for a response, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from my husband. A new email. My hands clenched as I clicked it open. I know this is difficult for you, but I need you to see reason. The kids are already adjusting and I don't want to drag this into something bigger than it needs to be. My mother is providing them with stability, and this arrangement is what's best for them. Please don't make things harder. I exhaled slowly, forcing down the rage bubbling inside me. Don't make things harder? That was easy for him to say when he had been the one orchestrating this entire scheme behind my back. His condescending tone, the way he tried to make it seem like I was the unreasonable one, it only fueled my determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for my children. The phone vibrated again, but this time it wasn't from him. It was my lawyer. He had responded. I can meet you first thing in the morning. Bring any documentation you have. Financial records, communication logs, anything that proves what they've done. We'll assess your case and move forward strategically. A wave of relief mixed with anticipation surged through me. Finally, I was taking action. I wouldn't be left in the dark anymore, waiting for them to strike next. I was stepping into the game they thought I had already lost. The night was restless. I barely slept, my mind replaying every conversation, every moment I had ignored the warning signs. But when the sun broke through the curtains, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the same woman I had been yesterday. I arrived at the lawyer's office with a file of documents, neatly organized evidence of the betrayal that had been unfolding for months. He listened intently, taking notes as I laid everything out. My husband's financial transfers, the sudden custody change, the messages from his mother. When I finished, he looked at me with a mixture of understanding and determination. "You have a case," he said. "A strong one. They didn't have the right to take your children without legal consent. And the financial movements? That's another issue we can pursue." For the first time in days, I felt a sense of control return. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was strategizing. "We'll start with an emergency custody hearing," he continued. "You need to file a petition to get your children back immediately. We'll also look into the financial records and see if there's anything legally actionable there." I nodded, absorbing every word. This was happening. I was fighting back. As I left his office, a new kind of energy filled me. The battle had begun, but I wasn't afraid. My husband and his mother thought they could corner me, that I would collapse under the weight of their manipulations. They had no idea I was just getting started. Walking out of the lawyer's office, I felt the shift. A weight had been lifted, but it was replaced with something sharper. Purpose. I had spent years bending, compromising, trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. But not anymore. Now I was playing by my own rules. The streets were buzzing with life, but my mind was miles away, already calculating my next steps. My lawyer was filing for an emergency custody hearing, but I couldn't sit around waiting for things to unfold at a legal pace. I had to act now. I returned home, stepping into the house that suddenly felt foreign. The walls held memories, laughter, love, but also shadows of a past that no longer existed. I looked around, my gaze settling on the framed photos on the mantel. Smiling faces. A perfect family. A perfect lie. I grabbed a box and started packing. Not clothes, not personal belongings, but everything that mattered. Legal documents. Birth certificates. Financial records. Anything that could be used against me, I gathered it all. Every trace of my dependence on him was erased bit by bit. Then I moved to the bank accounts. I transferred what was legally mine into a separate account, one that he couldn't touch. Every penny he had siphoned off was accounted for, but he had overlooked something. I had always been careful. I had my own emergency funds quietly set aside over the years, never expecting to use them but always knowing I might need to. And now I did. I wasn't just leaving, I was disappearing. By the time he and his mother realized what had happened, there would be nothing left to take from me. I wouldn't be the helpless woman they thought I was, waiting for them to dictate my life. The hardest part was walking into my children's empty rooms. Their toys were still scattered on the floor, their tiny clothes neatly folded in drawers. I ran my fingers over my son's favorite stuffed bear, my daughter's tiny ballet shoes. My heart clenched, but I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't the end. I would get them back. I had no doubt about that. But when they returned, they would come home to a mother who had rebuilt her life without their father's shadow looming over her. The next step was securing my exit. I had a friend, an old college roommate who had always told me, "If you ever need an escape, my door is open." I never thought I'd take her up on it. But now I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "I need a place to stay." "Then get here," she said without hesitation. "Whatever you need, I've got you." I packed only the essentials, just enough to leave without a trace. My mother-in-law had taken my children, thinking she had won, but she underestimated me. I wasn't just going to take them back. I was going to ensure she never had the chance to pull this stunt again. Before leaving, I stood in the center of the house one last time. I had walked into this marriage full of hope, believing in love, believing in him. Now I was walking away with something far more valuable: clarity. When my husband came back, he would find a house stripped of everything meaningful. He had expected to return to a broken woman, pleading for her family back. Instead, he would return to emptiness. And by the time he realized what had happened, it would already be too late. By the time I arrived at my friend's place, the reality of my choices settled in. I wasn't just running. I was positioning myself for a fight that would determine the future of my children. There was no room for hesitation, no space for self-doubt. I had already lost too much. Now it was about taking back what was mine. She welcomed me with open arms, no questions, just quiet understanding. The moment I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: safety. Not the illusion of it that my husband had crafted, but real, undeniable security. Still, I couldn't afford to relax. Not yet. My lawyer had already set things in motion. The emergency custody petition was filed, and now I had to prepare for what was coming next. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by documents, messages, and legal papers. Every call, every financial transfer, every attempt my husband's family made to undermine me, I documented it all. They had made a crucial mistake by underestimating me, by assuming I would crumble. Instead, I was building my case brick by brick. A few days passed, each one feeling like an eternity. My lawyer kept me updated, assuring me that things were moving forward. But patience had never been my strength, not when my children were caught in the middle of this battle. I had no doubt that my mother-in-law was feeding them lies, telling them I had abandoned them, twisting reality to fit her own narrative. The thought made my blood boil. Then my lawyer called with news that made my heart race. "We have a court date," he said. "Next week. Be ready." A surge of emotions flooded me. Relief, anticipation, determination. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment they would have to answer for what they had done. But just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, my phone buzzed with another message. This time from my husband. "Are you really going to take this to court? You're making a mistake." Mistake? The audacity of that sentence nearly made me laugh. As if he hadn't been the one making calculated moves behind my back. As if he had given me a choice. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The next time we would be face to face, it would be in a courtroom where his words would carry no weight against the truth. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. My mind kept playing out different scenarios. His mother showing up with her usual arrogance, my husband trying to manipulate the judge, the looks on their faces when they realized they had lost. But no matter how many times I imagined it, one thing remained the same. I wasn't walking into that courtroom as a victim. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the wrinkles in my blouse. My reflection stared back at me, and for the first time in a long time, I recognized the woman in front of me. Strong. Resilient. Unbreakable. Walking into the courthouse, I felt every pair of eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. My husband was already inside, sitting next to his mother, who looked as smug as ever. But the moment they saw me, that confidence flickered. Good. Let them be nervous. The hearing began, and I watched as my lawyer dismantled every lie they had tried to build. The evidence was clear. The sudden, unauthorized custody change. The financial manipulations. The judge's expression remained unreadable, but I knew one thing. They saw through the deception. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't hold back. I told the truth, every painful, ugly detail of what had been done to me, to my children. My voice never wavered. I wasn't just speaking as a mother fighting for her kids. I was speaking as a woman who had been pushed too far. By the time the hearing ended, the room was thick with tension. The judge took a moment before delivering the decision, but I had already seen the truth in their eyes. When the ruling came, my hands clenched into fists. Custody was mine. My mother-in-law's face drained of color. My husband sat frozen. They had lost. As I walked out of that courtroom, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. My battle wasn't over, but I had won the first, most important fight. And now, it was time for them to understand the consequences of underestimating me. Walking out of the courtroom with the ruling in my favor should have felt like victory. And in some ways, it did. But there was no time to celebrate, no moment to relish in their defeat. The battle wasn't over. It had only shifted into the next phase. I had won custody, but I knew my husband and his mother wouldn't accept it easily. They would fight back, look for loopholes, twist the truth however they could. I had to be ready for whatever came next. As I stepped into the courthouse hallway, I felt their eyes burning into me. My mother-in-law stood stiff, her hands gripping the strap of her purse as if squeezing it could stop her world from crumbling. My husband, on the other hand, was harder to read. He wasn't angry, not yet. His expression was cold, calculating, as if already working out his next move. That was what worried me the most. "You've made a mistake," he said quietly as I passed him. I stopped but didn't turn to face him. "The only mistake I made was trusting you." His mother scoffed. You think this is over? You think some ruling changes anything? You'll never keep them away from us. I turned then, meeting her gaze with a calm she didn't expect. You took my children from me once. That won't happen again. Her lips parted as if to say more, but I didn't wait. I walked away, my heels clicking against the marble floor with each deliberate step. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. My lawyer met me outside, his demeanor professional but firm. They might appeal, he warned. Or try to file for joint custody. They won't let this go. I know, I said. That's why I need to stay ahead of them. I had spent too long reacting, waiting for them to make the next move. Now I needed to be the one setting the pace. They had played this game believing I was weak, believing I would fold under pressure. It was time to prove them wrong. The first step was reclaiming my home. Not the physical house I had left behind, but the life they had stolen from me. My children deserved stability, a place where they felt safe, a mother who was present and strong. I had been that mother before, but now I had to become even more. I spent the next few days settling into our new routine. My children were hesitant at first, unsure of what to believe after all the confusion their grandmother had planted in their minds. I didn't push them. Instead, I focused on making things feel normal again. Morning routines, school drop-offs, bedtime stories. Little by little they softened. The walls that had been built between us, the doubts that had been sown, started to crack. One evening, as I tucked my son into bed, he finally asked the question I had been waiting for. Grandma said you didn't want us anymore. That's why we had to go with her. I swallowed the knot in my throat, keeping my voice gentle. That's not true, sweetheart. I never wanted to be away from you. His small fingers clutched the blanket. Then why did Daddy say you were angry all the time? I exhaled slowly. Sometimes grown-ups have problems and they don't always tell the truth. But I promise you, no matter what anyone says, I love you. And I will always fight for you. He seemed to think about that for a moment before nodding, as if storing the information away for later. It wasn't instant healing, but it was a start. The next day my phone rang. My lawyer. You were right, he said without preamble. They're trying to contest the ruling. I wasn't surprised. If anything, I was relieved. It meant they were predictable. I could prepare. What's their argument? They're claiming you're emotionally unstable. That removing the children from their established environment would be damaging. A bitter laugh escaped me. They're the ones who ripped them away from me in the first place. They're banking on dragging this out. Making you look unfit in the process. I should have been furious, but all I felt was resolve. Let them try. I spent the next week gathering evidence, building an even stronger case. I compiled messages, bank statements, testimonies from teachers and family friends. Every move they had made, every lie they had told, I documented it all. They wanted to question my fitness as a mother? Fine. I would bury them in the truth. The day of the appeal hearing arrived, and as I entered the courthouse, I could see it in their faces. Doubt. My husband, his mother, they weren't as sure of themselves anymore. They had expected me to back down. Instead, I had dug in. The hearing proceeded with the usual legal back and forth, their lawyer trying to paint me as emotional, reactive, incapable of providing a stable environment. But my lawyer was ruthless. Every accusation they made was countered with facts. Every claim of instability met with proof of their own manipulations. When the ruling came down, it was final. Full custody remained mine. I didn't look at them as I left the courtroom. I didn't need to. The silence behind me spoke volumes. Outside, I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. It was over. Really over. I had won. And they had lost. Completely. The courthouse doors shut behind me, and the weight of it all finally hit me. I had won. My children were mine, legally and unquestionably. No more fights, no more appeals, no more manipulations. The final ruling had sealed their fate, and for the first time in a long time I could breathe. But even as relief washed over me, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of their downfall. I glanced at my phone. No messages from my husband. No desperate attempts to bargain or threaten. Nothing from his mother either. The silence was louder than any argument they could have thrown at me. I knew they were reeling, scrambling to understand how their perfect plan had collapsed so spectacularly. They had thought they were untouchable, that they had built an impenetrable web of control. But they had overlooked one crucial thing, me. That night, I tucked my children into bed, running my fingers through their hair as they drifted off to sleep. They were safe now, far away from the manipulative hands that had tried to steal them from me. But as I watched them, a lingering thought took root. They weren't just trying to take my children. They were trying to erase me from their lives. And for that, they had to face the consequences. The next morning I started digging. My husband had been shifting money, moving it into hidden accounts before he ever told me our marriage was over. He thought I hadn't noticed that I had been too naive, too trusting to question where our finances were going. But I had documented everything. Every bank statement, every unauthorized withdrawal, every strange transaction that made no sense. And now I was about to expose it. I contacted my lawyer again. "There's something else I need to look into," I said, detailing the financial irregularities. He was quiet for a moment before responding, his voice calm but serious. "If what you're saying is true, he could be facing legal consequences beyond just the custody case." That was exactly what I wanted. I spent the next week preparing, going through years of records, highlighting every inconsistency, every shady business deal, every dollar that had vanished without explanation. Then, with my lawyer's guidance, I took everything to the authorities. The fallout was swift. I had expected it to take weeks, maybe months, for the cracks in his world to fully break open. But within days, whispers turned into full-blown investigations. My husband wasn't just moving money. He had been involved in questionable dealings that now placed him under serious scrutiny. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. He showed up at my door. I heard the knock and knew it was him before I even checked. When I opened it, he stood there looking disheveled, his usual arrogance replaced by something unfamiliar, fear. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I crossed my arms. "Talk about what? How you tried to erase me from my own children's lives. Or how you thought you could quietly steal money without anyone noticing." His jaw tightened. "You didn't have to do this." I let out a cold laugh. "You took my children away. You made me fight for them. You expected me to just disappear. And now you're upset because I fought back." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I made mistakes, all right? But you didn't have to take it this far. You could have just walked away." My expression hardened. "You walked away first. You just didn't expect me to survive without you." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth was sinking in. I wasn't the woman he had once controlled. I had rebuilt myself stronger than before, and there was nothing he could say to change what had already been set in motion. "You ruined me," he finally said. I tilted my head, considering his words. Then I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined yourself." With that, I shut the door, sealing the fate he had created for himself. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. As the door shut behind me, a finality settled over everything. The confrontation had ended, and with it, the last remnants of the life I had once known. My husband, ex-husband in every way that mattered, stood on the other side of that door, realizing the truth he had never prepared for. He had lost. Not just in court, not just in reputation, but in everything that truly mattered. And the best part? He had done it to himself. I leaned against the door for a moment, listening to the sound of his footsteps fading. He had no fight left in him, no more words to throw at me. He had come expecting to intimidate me, to guilt me into reversing his downfall. Instead, he had walked away with nothing. No children. No power. No control. For the first time in years, I was untouchable. I turned back toward the house, letting out a slow breath. My children were asleep in their rooms, unaware of what had just transpired. That was the way I wanted it. Their innocence had already been shaken enough by everything that had happened. I wouldn't let them carry any more of this weight. They deserved a life without the constant tug-of-war, without the whispers of manipulation, without the looming shadow of a family that had tried to take them from me. Stepping into the dimly lit living room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror above the mantel. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who had once been afraid to speak up, to stand her ground. She wasn't the woman who had begged for acceptance from people who had never intended to give it. She wasn't the wife who had stayed up at night questioning where she had gone wrong. She was free. The following days passed in a blur of quiet victories. The house, once a space filled with uncertainty and tension, became a home again. Laughter started to return, tentative at first, but growing stronger with each passing day. My children, slowly but surely, were letting go of the confusion and doubt that had been planted in their minds. I saw it in the way they reached for me, in the way their eyes held trust instead of hesitation. But the fight wasn't completely over. My lawyer kept me updated on the legal fallout from my ex-husband's financial dealings. The authorities were moving in, digging deeper into his mismanaged funds, his shady business ties, the quiet disappearances of money that couldn't be explained. What had started as a custody battle had unraveled into something much bigger. He wasn't just losing his family, he was losing the carefully constructed empire he had built around deception. The phone calls started coming in not from him but from people in his world. Business associates, old acquaintances, even mutual friends who had once stayed neutral. They all had the same undertone in their voices, curiosity laced with panic. They wanted to know if the rumors were true, if I had really exposed him, if I had really taken everything. I didn't answer most of them. I didn't need to. But then one day a number flashed across my screen that made me pause. His mother. For a long moment I stared at the phone, debating whether to let it ring. Every instinct told me she had nothing to say that I needed to hear. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe closure, made me pick up. She didn't start with pleasantries. "You've ruined my son," she said, her voice sharp with barely restrained anger. I smiled to myself, settling onto the couch. "No," I corrected. "He ruined himself." "You think this is over?" she snapped. "You think taking the children and some money changes everything?" I let out a soft laugh. "I didn't take the children. I protected them. And as for the money? That's between him and the law." "You were never good enough for him," she hissed. "Never good enough for this family." The words should have hurt. Maybe once they would have. But now, they meant nothing. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "I was never good enough. For him or for you. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me." She sucked in a sharp breath, as if startled by my lack of reaction. She had expected the woman I used to be, the one she could manipulate, belittle, break down. But that woman was gone. "I just wanted you to know," I continued, "that you'll never control me again. And you'll never get another chance to hurt my children." There was silence on the other end, and then, in a tone that was almost unreadable, she said, "You really think you've won, don't you?" I smiled, leaning back. "Oh, I know I have." And with that I ended the call. I stared at the phone for a moment, then set it down and looked around the room. This was my life now. My home. My future. It didn't belong to them anymore. Later that evening, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and whispered, "Are we safe now, Mommy?" I brushed a hand over her hair, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." And for the first time in years I truly believed it. The night felt still, the weight of everything settling into place. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic breathing of my children in the next room. For the first time in years I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for the next fight, the next manipulation, the next betrayal. But even though I had won in court, even though I had shut the door on my ex-husband and his mother, one final chapter remained unfinished. The legal battle had secured my children's safety, but there was still justice to be served. My ex-husband had spent years deceiving me, shifting money into places he thought I would never find, making financial moves that would eventually collapse under scrutiny. And now the consequences of his actions were closing in on him. I checked my phone. A message from my lawyer. "Call me when you wake up. We need to discuss new developments." I knew what that meant. The walls were closing in on him. Morning arrived with a sense of anticipation. The sun was barely up when I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee, breathing in the crisp air. My phone buzzed and I answered immediately. "You're going to want to hear this," my lawyer said, his tone sharper than usual. "The authorities are moving forward with an official investigation into his financial dealings. The evidence you provided put everything in motion, but now, other people are coming forward." My fingers tightened around my cup. Other people? Business associates, former partners. People who had their suspicions but never had enough proof to take action. Your case cracked it open. What started as a custody battle turned into something much bigger. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. It was happening. They're looking into fraud, tax evasion, and a string of shady transactions. If they push forward with charges, he could be facing serious repercussions, my lawyer continued. This isn't just about financial penalties anymore. A strange sense of vindication settled over me. He had spent so long thinking he was untouchable, weaving lies, manipulating people, believing he could get away with everything. But now the truth was coming for him. I thought back to our last conversation, to the way he had stood at my doorstep, expecting me to fold, expecting me to feel guilt for his mistakes. He had no idea then how much deeper the consequences would run. Hours passed, and just as I was preparing breakfast for the kids, another call came through. This time from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. There was silence on the line before a familiar voice spoke. You did this. My ex-husband's voice was unsteady, but it wasn't anger that filled his tone. It was something else. Desperation. You did this to yourself, I replied evenly. You've been playing this game for years. You just finally lost. A bitter chuckle crackled through the receiver. Do you have any idea what you've done? I protected my children, I said. And I made sure you finally faced the consequences of everything you've done. His breath hitched, and for the first time I heard it, the panic. He wasn't just losing his money or his reputation. He was losing control. They're saying I might lose everything, he murmured. Everything. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He had built his world on deceit, arrogance, and manipulation, and now it was crumbling beneath him. For years I had been afraid of him, afraid of his power, afraid of what he could take from me. But now he was the one afraid. This wasn't supposed to happen, he whispered. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself before delivering my final words. You should have thought about that before you tried to destroy me. And with that I hung up. The weight of it all finally lifted. It was over. Not just the custody battle, not just the legal fights, but everything. His reign of control, his ability to manipulate, his belief that he could shape the world however he pleased. It was all gone. Justice had been served. As I turned back toward my children, watching them laugh over breakfast, I knew one thing for certain. We were finally free.